Captain Sarah Chen watched from the observation deck as another transport ship exploded in the distance, its orange flames briefly lighting up the black void of space before being snuffed out by the vacuum. The Galactic Defense Fleet was losing this war badly, and everyone knew it. "Another human vessel destroyed," sneered Commander Zixthor, his reptilian features twisted in what passed for amusement among his species. The tall, scaled alien stood near the central planning table, surrounded by other high-ranking officers from various alien races. How utterly predictable! Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened slightly. As the only human representative in the war room aboard the flagship Stellar Dominance, she had grown accustomed to such comments over the past 6 months. The other species in the Galactic Coalition viewed humans as the newest and weakest members of their alliance. "The human fleet has been assigned to rear-guard duties for good reason," added General Krex, a massive insectoid creature whose mandibles clicked with each word. "Their primitive technology and inferior tactical understanding make them unsuitable for frontline combat against the Devourers." The Devourers were an ancient machine intelligence that had emerged from the galactic core 3 years ago, systematically consuming entire star systems and converting all matter into more of their kind. No one knew where they came from or what their ultimate goal was, but their advance seemed unstoppable. Sarah's tablet chimed softly with an incoming message from Admiral Torres back on Earth. She glanced at the encrypted text. "New defensive protocols ready for implementation. Awaiting your signal." She deleted the message immediately. "The humans should stick to supply runs and evacuation duties," continued Zixthor, his golden eyes gleaming with superiority. "Leave the real fighting to species with actual military prowess. The Zephyrian Empire has been waging war for 10,000 years. The Krexian hives have conquered hundreds of worlds. What have humans accomplished? A few scattered colonies and some crude nuclear weapons." Several other alien commanders chuckled at this, their various forms of laughter creating a discordant symphony. Sarah noticed that Admiral Vex Hara, the four-armed Celestian fleet commander, remained silent, her purple-hued face thoughtful as she studied the tactical displays. "The humans did manage to hold the Kepler system for 3 weeks, offered Lieutenant Quintal, a young Etherian whose translucent skin showed the nervous purple glow of his internal organs. "That was longer than expected. Only because the Devourers were focused on harvesting the gas giants," Zixthor dismissed. "Any species could have hidden behind asteroids for a few weeks. It hardly demonstrates military competence." Sarah finally spoke up, her voice calm and measured. "Our evacuation effort saved over 2 million civilians from the Kepler system. That's what we call a victory." "Evacuation," Krex's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Yes, humans are quite good at running away. Perhaps you should focus on what you do best and leave strategic planning to your betters." The war room fell into an uncomfortable silence as Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly. She had endured months of these insults, always maintaining her professional demeanor as instructed by Earth Command. The human contribution to the war effort was being deliberately minimized, their ships assigned to the least dangerous sectors, their tactical suggestions ignored or ridiculed. Admiral Vex Hara finally broke the silence. "The current defensive line at the Centauri cluster is failing. We've lost 6 major fleet engagements in the past month. Perhaps it's time to consider alternative strategies." "The strategy is sound," Zixthor insisted, his chest puffing with pride. "The Zephyrian formations have proven effective for millennia. These Devourers simply have superior numbers. What we need is more firepower, not human meddling in proven tactics." Sarah looked at the holographic display showing the current battle formations. The alien fleets were arranged in traditional patterns that had indeed worked for thousands of years against organic opponents. But the Devourers weren't organic. They were artificial intelligences with perfect coordination, no fear, and the ability to learn and adapt faster than any biological entity. "Request permission to move the human fleet to the Proxima Vector," Sarah said quietly. The room erupted in scoffs and dismissive gestures. "The Proxima Vector is a critical defensive position," Krex buzzed angrily. "We cannot risk human incompetence compromising our entire left flank." "The humans will remain in the rear sectors where they belong," Zixthor declared with finality. "Your role is to evacuate civilians and provide logistical support. Nothing more." Sarah nodded slowly, then typed a brief message on her tablet. "Implement Phase 1. She sent it to Admiral Torres with her authorization code. 2 hours later, the first wave of Devourers hit the Centauri defensive line with overwhelming force. The alien formations, despite their reputation and historical success, began crumbling within minutes under the precise, coordinated assault of the machine intelligence. Sarah watched the tactical displays with growing concern as red indicators showed ship after ship being destroyed or disabled. The Devourer vessels moved with inhuman precision, adapting their tactics in real time to counter every defensive maneuver the Coalition forces attempted. "Impossible," breathed General Krex, as his own command ship barely escaped destruction by jumping to hyperspace. "They're predicting our movements before we make them. It's as if they know our tactical databases better than we do," added Admiral Vex Hara, her 4 arms working frantically at her control station to coordinate the retreat of her surviving ships. Commander Zixthor stood rigid at the central display, his reptilian features pale as he watched centuries of Zephyrian military doctrine being systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to know exactly what they would do next. "The line is breaking," reported Communications Officer Pelnock, his tentacles quivering with stress. "All sectors reporting massive casualties. The Devourers are advancing toward the core systems." Sarah remained calm as chaos erupted around her. The alien commanders shouted orders, blamed each other for the failure, and argued about who should take responsibility for the disaster. She simply watched and waited. "Where are the human ships?" demanded Zixthor suddenly, spinning to face Sarah. "They were supposed to be covering the evacuation routes." Sarah checked her tablet, which showed the real-time positions of all human vessels. "The human fleet is moving to intercept the Devourer advance," she replied matter-of-factly. "What?" Krex's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. "They have no authorization for combat operations. Order them to return to rear positions immediately." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Sarah said, her tone remaining perfectly professional. "Admiral Torres has assumed operational command of all human forces under Emergency Protocol 7. Earth Command's direct orders supersede Coalition authority during existential threats to human colonies." The alien commanders stared at her in disbelief. Emergency Protocol 7 was an obscure clause in the Coalition Charter that few non-humans had bothered to study. It allowed individual member species to act independently if their survival was directly threatened. "This is mutiny," Zixthor snarled. "I'll have your entire species expelled from the Coalition." Sarah finally allowed herself a small smile. "You'll need to survive this battle first, Commander." On the tactical display, new contacts began appearing as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly in the path of the advancing Devourer forces. The alien commanders watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as 300 human ships arranged themselves in formations that none of them recognized. "What are they doing?" whispered Admiral Vex Hara. "Those formations make no tactical sense. They're exposing their flanks and leaving gaps in their defensive coverage." Sarah studied the display with satisfaction. The human ships were indeed arranged in patterns that violated every conventional rule of space warfare that the galaxy had established over millions of years. But humans hadn't learned space combat from alien teachers. They had developed their own methods through centuries of conflict on Earth and decades of fighting against pirates and raiders in the outer colonies. More importantly, They had spent the past 6 months analyzing every scrap of data about Devourer tactics while pretending to be incompetent support vessels. While the aliens dismissed human intelligence reports as inferior, Admiral Torres and his staff had been developing entirely new forms of space combat specifically designed to counter artificial intelligence opponents. "The Devourers are engaging the human fleet," reported Pelnock, his voice tight with tension. "Initial contact in 30 seconds. The room fell silent as everyone watched the display. The Devourer ships, sleek black constructs the size of small moons, moved with their characteristic precision toward the human formation. Their weapons, capable of stripping away molecular bonds and converting matter directly into energy, began charging for the first volvo. Sarah found herself holding her breath despite her confidence in the plan. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If the human fleet failed, not only would they be destroyed, but the path to Earth and the other core human worlds would be wide open. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness of space as energy beams and projectile weapons painted brilliant streaks across the void. On the display, the initial casualties appeared as red markers, and Sarah's heart sank as she saw several human ships winking out of existence. But something strange was happening. The Devourer formation, which had moved with perfect coordination against every other species, seemed to hesitate. Their precise movements became irregular, almost confused, as they encountered tactics and formations their vast databases had never processed before. "Impossible," breathed Zixthor, leaning closer to the display. "The Devourers are breaking formation." Indeed, the machine intelligence's perfect coordination was fracturing as they struggled to adapt to human unpredictability. Where alien tactics were based on logical optimization and proven historical patterns, human military doctrine had evolved from thousands of years of fighting other humans, beings who specialized in deception, misdirection, and doing exactly the opposite of what logic dictated they should do. Sarah watched as Admiral Torres implemented the second phase of the plan. The human ships suddenly scattered in all directions, abandoning their formation entirely in a maneuver that would have been considered cowardice or panic by any alien military tradition. But each ship was moving according to a carefully planned pattern, drawing the Devourers into pre-designated kill zones while appearing to flee in terror. "Are they retreating?" asked General Krex, confusion evident in his buzzing voice. "No," said Admiral Vexhera slowly, her tactical mind beginning to understand what she was seeing. "They're hunting. The Devourers, designed to pursue and destroy fleeing enemies efficiently, followed the scattering human ships directly into the trap. As they spread out to chase individual vessels, they lost the concentrated firepower that had made them unstoppable against traditional formations. Suddenly, space erupted with explosions as hidden human ships emerged from behind asteroids and debris fields, attacking the now isolated Devourer vessels from unexpected angles. The machine intelligence found itself fighting not a conventional space battle, but something more resembling a three-dimensional game of hide-and-seek, combined with guerrilla warfare. "How are they coordinating without a central command structure?" demanded Zixthor, watching in amazement as human ships seemed to anticipate each other's movements despite having no apparent communication network. Sarah allowed herself another small smile. "Humans have been fighting as small independent units for thousands of years, Commander. We don't need central command to work together effectively. Every human captain out there knows exactly what their role is and how to adapt when the situation changes." The battle continued for another hour, and gradually the tide began to turn. The Devourers, despite their technological superiority and vast numbers, found themselves consistently outmaneuvered by an enemy that refused to fight according to any logical pattern. Human ships would appear where they couldn't possibly be, attack from directions that made no tactical sense, and disappear just as the Devourers adapted to their presence. When the smoke finally cleared, the impossible had happened. The Devourer advance had been stopped for the first time since the war began. Nearly half of their fleet had been destroyed or disabled, while the humans had lost less than 30% of their forces. The war room aboard the Stellar Dominance was completely silent, as the reality of what they had witnessed sank in. The species they had dismissed as primitive and incompetent had just accomplished what the combined might of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had failed to do. Sarah stood up slowly, gathering her notes and preparing to return to the human fleet. Admiral Torres sends his compliments and requests permission to begin pursuit of the remaining Devourer forces. He believes we can push them back beyond the Centauri cluster within the week. She paused at the door and turned back to address the stunned alien commanders. Oh, and the Admiral wanted me to remind you that the human fleet is still available for rear guard duty and supply runs, should you require our assistance with those critical operations. With that, she left the room, leaving behind a group of B-3 days after the Battle of Centauri. The Galactic Coalition's High Command found itself in an unprecedented situation. For the first time in over 2 years, the Devourer advance had not only been stopped, but reversed. Human forces under Admiral Torres had pushed the machine intelligence back across 3 star systems, liberating colonies that had been considered permanently lost. Admiral Vex Hera stood before the massive tactical display in the Coalition's Strategic Command Center, her 4 purple arms moving gracefully as she manipulated holographic star charts. Unlike her colleagues, she had spent the past 72 hours studying every piece of data from the human engagement, trying to understand how such an impossible victory had been achieved. The humans are requesting permission to advance into the Vegan sector, announced communications specialist Yithnal, her crystalline form chiming softly as she spoke. Admiral Torres believes they can retake the mining worlds within 2 weeks. General Krex's mandibles clicked aggressively. Absolutely not. The Vegan sector is of critical strategic importance. We cannot risk it falling due to human recklessness. Recklessness? Admiral Vex Hera turned from the display, her tone sharp. They've liberated more territory in 3 days than we managed in 6 months. Perhaps we should consider that their methods, however unconventional, are effective. Commander Zixthor entered the chamber at that moment, his usually immaculate uniform rumpled and his reptilian features showing signs of exhaustion. He had spent the past 3 days attempting to explain to the Zephyrian High Command how humanity's supposedly primitive forces had succeeded where their ancient military traditions had failed. The Zephyrian Council is demanding answers, he announced without preamble. They want to know why we were not informed that the humans possessed advanced tactical capabilities. Some are suggesting this was a deliberate deception to gain strategic advantage within the coalition. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human scientific advisor who had arrived with the latest supply convoy, looked up from her datapad. Unlike Captain Chen, who was military, Dr. Vasquez was a civilian researcher who specialized in xenopsychology and interspecies relations. She had been largely ignored by the coalition leadership until now. There was no deception, Commander, she said calmly. You simply never bothered to ask about human military history or tactical development. You assumed that because we're the newest members of the coalition, we must be the least capable. Zixthor's golden eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting that we should have studied the military capabilities of a species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel when we encountered them? Dr. Vasquez smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Commander, humans have been engaged in warfare continuously for over 5,000 years of recorded history. We've fought with sticks and stones, bronze and iron, gunpowder and nuclear weapons, in every conceivable environment from deserts to Arctic tundra to the depths of our oceans. We've perfected the art of asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and small unit operations because we've never had the luxury of overwhelming technological superiority. She stood up and walked to the tactical display, pointing at the recent battle sites. When humans first encountered alien technology, we didn't just adopt it blindly. We studied it, understood it, and then figured out how to counter it. While you were dismissing us as primitive, our military analysts were watching every engagement with the Devourers, learning their patterns, understanding their limitations. General Krex's massive form shifted uncomfortably. This still doesn't explain how they achieved tactical coordination without a central command network. No species fights effectively without proper hierarchy and communication protocols. Dr. Vasquez laughed, and the sound carried an edge that made several aliens step back. General, human military doctrine is based on the assumption that command and control will be disrupted. We train our forces to operate independently, to make decisions without waiting for orders, to improvise solutions to problems they've never encountered before. We call it mission command, giving junior officers the authority to adapt their tactics based on local conditions. Admiral Vex Hara was studying the human woman with new interest. This explains the seemingly chaotic nature of their formations. They weren't following a predetermined pattern. Each ship commander was making independent decisions based on the tactical situation. Exactly, Dr. Vasquez nodded. The Devourers are artificial intelligences. They excel at processing known variables and calculating optimal responses. But humans are fundamentally irrational by AI standards. We make decisions based on intuition, experience, and sometimes pure emotion. We do things that make no logical sense, which means the Devourers can't predict or counter our actions. The room fell silent as the implications of this sank in. For millions of years, galactic warfare had been governed by logical principles: superior technology, better organization, more efficient resource allocation. The idea that irrationality and unpredictability could be tactical advantages was completely alien to their way of thinking. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in red as officers rushed to their stations. "Multiple Devourer fleets dropping out of hyperspace," reported Sensor Chief Calthon, his tentacles flying over his control surfaces. 67 capital ships, over 300 support vessels. They're moving directly toward the liberated colonies in the Kepler system. Zixthor straightened, his military bearing reasserting itself despite his exhaustion. It's a counterattack. They're trying to retake the systems the humans liberated. How long until our main fleet can respond? 18 hours minimum, Admiral Vex Hara replied grimly. The bulk of our forces are still regrouping after the Centauri engagement. The human ships are the only significant force in that sector. General Krex's mandibles clicked rapidly. 300 human vessels cannot stand against 67 Devourer capital ships. It would be suicide. We must order them to retreat and preserve their forces for a coordinated counterattack. Dr. Vasquez was already typing on her communicator. "I'm in contact with Admiral Torres. He's asking for permission to engage." "Absolutely not!" Zixthor slammed his fist on the nearest console. "I will not be responsible for the destruction of the human fleet through reckless bravado. Order them to withdraw immediately." Before Dr. Vasquez could respond, Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system. She was aboard the human flagship Determination, which was leading the defense of the liberated colonies. "Coalition Command, this is Captain Chen. We've detected the incoming Devourer fleet. Admiral Torres requests clarification of our orders." Zixthor stepped forward to the communication station. "Captain, you are ordered to withdraw your forces immediately. You cannot engage a fleet of that size with any hope of victory." There was a pause before Chen's voice returned, and when she spoke, there was something different in her tone. A hard edge that hadn't been there during the months of ridicule and dismissal she had endured. "Commander Zixthor, I'm looking at the tactical display. The Devourer fleet is moving to attack civilian evacuation transports from the colonies we just liberated. 2 million people, including families with children who've been hiding in underground shelters for months. Are you ordering us to abandon them? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Everyone in the command center understood the tactical situation. The human fleet couldn't win against such overwhelming numbers, but they were the only force positioned to protect the civilian evacuees. Zixthor's throat worked silently as he struggled with the decision. Military logic dictated preserving the fleet for a larger battle later, but the political consequences of abandoning millions of civilians would be catastrophic. Dr. Vasquez spoke quietly into her communicator. "Admiral Torres, what's your assessment?" Torres' voice joined the conversation, calm and professional. "We can delay them long enough for the evacuation to complete. Not all of us will make it out, but the civilians will. Sometimes that's what victory looks like." Admiral Vexhara stepped forward. "Admiral, be realistic. 67 capital ships against your entire fleet? The mathematics are impossible." There was a sound that might have been laughter from the human admiral. "Ma'am, with respect, mathematics didn't stop us at Centauri either. We've got something the Devourers don't understand, and apparently something our allies don't understand either." "Which is what?" General Krex demanded. "We're not fighting for tactical advantage or strategic position," Torres replied. "We're fighting for people. 2 million human souls who trusted us to protect them. That changes everything." Dr. Vasquez looked around the room at the alien faces surrounding her. "Gentlemen, you've spent months studying our technology, our fleet capabilities, our tactical databases. But you've never studied us. You don't understand what humans are willing to do when we're fighting to protect our own." The communication channel crackled as Captain Chen's voice returned. "Coalition Command, the Devourer fleet will be in engagement range in 40 minutes. We need a decision now." Zixthor looked around the room, seeking support from his colleagues, but found only uncertainty and conflict. The weight of command had never felt heavier, as he realized he was about to order either the sacrifice of the human fleet or the abandonment of 2 million civilians. Admiral Vexhara broke the silence. "The Coalition Charter guarantees the protection of all member species civilians. We cannot order them to abandon those people." "Then we're ordering them to die for nothing," Krex buzzed angrily. "The fleet will be destroyed, the civilians will be captured anyway, and we'll have lost our most effective anti-devourer force for no gain." Dr. Vasquez was reading something on her datapad, her expression thoughtful. "Actually, Admiral Torres is transmitting a tactical analysis. He thinks they can do more than just delay the Devourers." Every alien in the room turned to stare at her. Zixthor's voice was barely controlled. "What do you mean?" "He thinks they can win." The statement was so absurd that for a moment, no one responded. The idea that 300 ships could defeat a force more than twice their size, led by capital ships each capable of destroying entire fleets, was beyond comprehension. General Krex was the first to find his voice. "That's impossible. Even with their unconventional tactics, the numbers don't support any scenario where the humans survive, let alone achieve victory." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her pad. "Admiral Torres would like permission to demonstrate something called the Terran Doctrine. He says it's time the galaxy learned what humans are really capable of when we stop holding back." "Holding back?" Admiral Vexhara's four arms gestured in confusion. "They've already demonstrated tactical capabilities beyond anything in our databases." "No," Dr. Vasquez said quietly. "They've demonstrated our peacetime capabilities. What you saw at Centauri was the human equivalent of a training exercise. The Admiral is asking permission to show you how we fight when we're truly angry." The implications of her words sent a chill through the command center. If the incredible victory at Centauri had been achieved with restrained capabilities, what could humans accomplish when fully unleashed? Zixthor found himself facing a decision that would reshape his understanding of warfare, of humanity, and of his own species' place in the galaxy. In 40 minutes, he would discover what it meant when humans stopped pretending to be civilized and started fighting to protect what they loved. The countdown had begun, and across the galaxy, 2 million people in evacuation ships looked to the stars, trusting that someone would stand between them and the darkness. Ings who were only beginning to realize how completely they had misjudged the newest members of their coalition. The Coalition Command Center fell into absolute silence as the first reports came in from the engagement zone. What they were seeing on the tactical displays defied every law of warfare that had governed galactic conflict for millions of years. "Impossible!" whispered Communications Chief Yithnal, her crystalline form dim with shock. "The human fleet! They're not retreating!" Admiral Vex Hara leaned over her station, her 4 purple arms working frantically to process the incoming data streams. The Devourer fleet had arrived exactly as predicted. 67 capital ships accompanied by over 300 support vessels, their black hulls gleaming with the absorbed light of consumed solar systems. But the human response was unlike anything in their military databases. Instead of forming defensive lines or attempting to delay the advance through hit-and-run tactics, the human ships had done something that violated every principle of space combat. They had charged directly at the center of the Devourer formation. "They're using ramming speed," reported Sensor Chief Calthon, his tentacles quivering with disbelief. "Multiple human vessels are on collision courses with Devourer capital ships." Commander Zixthor gripped the edge of his console until his claws left gouges in the metal. "They've gone mad. This isn't tactics. It's suicide." Dr. Vasquez remained calm, her eyes fixed on her personal communicator where she was receiving direct updates from Admiral Torres. "Actually, Commander, this is the Terran doctrine in its purest form. When humans are backed into a corner with no chance of conventional victory, we don't surrender or retreat. We change the rules of engagement entirely." On the display, the first human ship reached its target. The destroyer, Indomitable, slammed into the side of a Devourer capital ship at near light speed. The explosion was visible from thousands of kilometers away, a brilliant white flash that consumed both vessels and damaged 3 nearby enemy ships. "They're trading 1 for 1, General Krex buzzed in horrified fascination. "But the numbers still don't work in their favor." "Watch," Dr. Vasquez said softly. As the debris cloud from the first collision expanded, something extraordinary happened. The explosion had created a massive electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the Devourer formation's communication network. For 17 seconds, the artificial intelligences lost coordination with each other. In those 17 seconds, the human fleet executed a maneuver that would be studied by military academies for the next 1,000 years. Every remaining human ship activated what Admiral Torres had codenamed Operation Berserker. Emergency bulkheads sealed, life support systems shifted to emergency reserves, and artificial gravity shut down throughout their fleet. The human crews, secured in crash harnesses and breathing through individual oxygen supplies, prepared for something no alien species had ever attempted in space combat. "What are they doing?" demanded Admiral Vex Hara as the human ships began spinning on their axes, faster and faster until they became gyroscopic weapons platforms. Captain Chen's voice crackled through the communication system, strained but determined. "Coalition Command, this is Chen aboard the Determination. We're implementing Emergency Protocol Omega. All human personnel are secured for extreme maneuvers." The spinning human ships suddenly fired their engines in seemingly random directions, but the chaos was carefully calculated. Each vessel became an unpredictable projectile, careening through the Devourer formation with their weapons blazing continuously in all directions. "They've turned their ships into 3-dimensional artillery shells," breathed Admiral Vex Hara. "They're trading accuracy for unpredictability." The Devourers, designed to calculate optimal responses to logical threats, found themselves completely unable to track or predict the movements of ships that were essentially controlled explosions. Their precision targeting systems, calibrated for conventional warfare, couldn't lock onto targets that were simultaneously spinning, accelerating, and firing in multiple directions. But the true genius of Operation Berserker wasn't revealed until the human ships began working in coordinated groups. Ships that appeared to be out of control were actually following complex mathematical patterns, creating overlapping fields of fire that ensured no Devourer vessel could find safe passage through the chaos. "How are they maintaining coordination while spinning like that?" Zixthor demanded. "The G-forces alone should have killed their crews." Dr. Vasquez checked her readout. "Human pilots can withstand up to 9 times Earth's gravity for short periods when properly equipped. Our crews trained for this specific scenario. What you're seeing is the result of 2 years of preparation and 3,000 years of human military evolution." The battle raged for 37 minutes. And when the spinning stopped, the impossible had happened again. The Devourer fleet, despite overwhelming numerical superiority, had been completely destroyed. Not a single enemy vessel escaped the engagement zone. The human fleet had lost 60% of their ships, but the evacuation transports were safe, and 2 million civilians were now en route to secure coalition worlds. The command center remained silent as the full implications of what they had witnessed sank in. Admiral Torres's voice finally broke the quiet as he reported in from his damaged flagship. "Coalition Command, this is Admiral Torres. The engagement zone is secure. All Devourer vessels have been neutralized. Human casualties are significant but acceptable given the mission parameters." Zixthor found his voice first, though it was barely a whisper. "Admiral, how did you know that tactic would work?" There was a pause before Torres responded, and when he spoke, his tone carried the weight of millennia of human warfare. "Commander, my great-grandfather fought in the Pacific Theater during World War II. He told me something when I was young that every human military officer learns eventually." "Which was?" "When you can't win by being better, you win by being willing to do what your enemy can't imagine. The Devourers are artificial intelligences, perfect, logical, calculating. They can't conceive of deliberately destroying yourself to protect someone else because self-preservation is hardwired into their base programming." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward to address the stunned alien commanders. "Gentlemen, what you've just witnessed is why humans have survived every catastrophe our planet has thrown at us for millions of years. We don't just adapt to threats. We become threats that nothing else can adapt to." Admiral Vexahara's voice was filled with something approaching awe. "You've been holding back this entire time. The months of rearguard duties, the supply runs, the evacuation missions. You could have been fighting like this from the beginning." "No," Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "We needed to understand the enemy first. Every engagement you dismissed as human weakness was actually intelligence gathering. We let you think we were incompetent while we studied the Devourers and developed tactics specifically designed to counter their artificial intelligence." She turned to address the room as a whole. "You want to know the real difference between humans and every other species in this galaxy? You all evolved on worlds where cooperation and logic led to survival and prosperity. Humans evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, predators that hunted us, diseases that decimated our populations, and natural disasters that wiped out entire civilizations." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "We didn't survive by being the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. We survived by being the most stubborn, the most creative, and the most willing to sacrifice everything for the survival of our species. When faced with impossible odds, we don't calculate the probability of success. We change the definition of victory." General Krex's mandibles clicked slowly as understanding dawned. "This is why you never shared these tactics with us during the war planning sessions. You never asked. Dr. Vasquez replied simply. You assumed that because we were new to galactic civilization, we had nothing to contribute. You put us in the rear because you thought we were weak, not because you were protecting valuable allies for the right moment. Commander Zix Thor looked around the room at his fellow officers, seeing his own realization reflected in their alien features. For months, they had been fighting a war with one hand tied behind their backs, dismissing their most effective weapon because it didn't fit their preconceptions of proper warfare. Dr. Vasquez, he said formally, I owe you and your species an apology. We have been short-sighted in our assessment of human capabilities. Apology accepted, Commander, but there's something else you need to understand. She gestured toward the tactical display where the cleanup operations were beginning. What you saw today was humans fighting to protect their own people. But you need to know that those 2 million evacuees, about 40% of them weren't human. The room fell silent again as this information registered. The incredible sacrifice, the impossible victory, the demonstration of tactical capabilities that bordered on the supernatural, all of it had been to protect not just humans, but Zephyrians, Crexians, Etherians, and dozens of other species who had found themselves trapped in the liberated colonies. You fought like that, Admiral Vexhara said slowly, for people who weren't even your own species? Dr. Vasquez smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Coalition Command, there was genuine warmth in the expression. Admiral, that's something else you need to learn about humans. Once we decide to protect someone, they become our people. Species doesn't matter. We don't just fight for humans, we fight for anyone who can't fight for themselves. Captain Chen's voice joined the conversation from the damaged human fleet. Coalition Command, we're ready to begin pursuit of any remaining Devourer forces in adjacent sectors. Admiral Torres estimates we can clear the entire region within 2 weeks if we maintain current operational tempo. Zix Thor looked at the tactical display showing the human casualties, then at Dr. Vasquez, then at his fellow commanders who had spent months ridiculing the species that had just saved the galaxy. Captain Chen, he said, his voice carrying a respect that had been absent for months. Please inform Admiral Torres that the human fleet has full authorization for independent tactical command. All coalition forces in the sector are ordered to provide support as requested. He paused, struggling with words that his species' culture made difficult to express. And please tell your people that the Zephyrian Empire formally recognizes the tactical and strategic superiority of the human fleet. We were wrong to underestimate you. Similar statements came from General Krex and the other alien commanders, each acknowledging in their own way that their months of arrogance and dismissal had nearly cost them the war. Dr. Vasquez accepted their apologies graciously, but her expression remained serious. Gentlemen, there's one more thing you should know about the Terran doctrine. Which is? Asked Admiral Vexhara. What you saw today was humans fighting defensively, protecting people we care about. You still haven't seen what happens when we go on the offensive against an enemy that has proven it's a threat to innocent lives. She turned to look at the star charts, showing Devourer-controlled space stretching toward the galactic core. The machine intelligence has been consuming entire civilizations for 3 years. Billions of beings have been converted to raw materials for their expansion. They made a mistake when they targeted those evacuation ships. What mistake? Zix Thor asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. Dr. Vasquez's smile was sharp and predatory. They made it personal. As if summoned by her words, Admiral Torres's voice came through the communication system one final time. Coalition Command, this is Torres. We've analyzed the Devourer command structure from the engagement. We know where their core processing facilities are located. The implications hit the alien commanders like a physical blow. The humans weren't just going to drive the Devourers back. They were going to hunt them down and end the threat permanently. Admiral Vexahara said carefully, are you suggesting an assault on the galactic core? That's thousands of light years through hostile territory. No, ma'am, Torres replied, and there was something in his voice that made the temperature in the command center seem to drop several degrees. I'm not suggesting it. I'm informing you that we're going to do it. The only question is whether the coalition wants to be part of the solution or if humanity needs to handle this alone. The room fell silent for the final time. Not the silence of shock or disbelief, but the profound quiet that comes when beings realize they are in the presence of something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Dr. Vasquez looked around at the alien faces surrounding her, seeing wonder, fear, respect, and admiration in equal measure. Welcome to the human race, gentlemen. We hope you're ready for what comes next. Outside the viewports, the human fleet was already turning toward the galactic core, ready to begin a campaign that would either end the Devourer threat forever or see humanity itself consumed in the attempt. But as the aliens were finally beginning to understand, those were the kinds of odds that humans lived for.